Hello and welcome to another episode of Instrumental Ramblings with me, Joe Dusepo. Now, I was recently described by a viewer of this channel as the David Attenborough of musical instruments. For this episode, we are taking a visit to the National Gallery, which is located here in London. In this episode, we're going to be looking at some paintings which I went to see, as you would expect, in the National Gallery. That day I was doing some research on late medieval and early Renaissance lutes, so this is what all these paintings show. This is the tag, label, caption, whatever the right word is, for the first painting. It's a view of the entire painting, and here is a close-up view of the lute. So we can see here that this is a 6-course lute. It's been played with the fingers and it has that more elongated, slimmer shape of a Renaissance lute. And here is the next caption. Let's go with the term caption. Now this is an interesting lute in this painting because it has kind of more the Renaissance shape, although you can't see the body entirely, but it has only 5 courses of strings. But the date of the painting, as you can see, is from the 1520s, so that's quite late for a 5-course lute. Here's a closer view of the body. You can't entirely see the shape of the body there. And here is a close-up of the peg box and the neck. There you can see the 5 courses. And on to the next caption, next painting. A relatively famous painting. What's interesting about this to me is that you can see these lines here on the body. The way they are suggests to me that they are not body frets, as you'd see on some lutes which are contemporarily built and on some historical instruments. So they are not wooden frets which are stuck to the body, because they appear to be different lengths, and what this suggests to me is that is a pencil line or something similar drawn on, as opposed to wooden frets which are on the body. And this is a 5-course lute. It has quite a rounded, more medieval shape. This is from about 1485 to 95, so that's quite late for a medieval lute shape, but the strings do not run down the middle of the body. So that could be a body which has become warped, or it could just be the way it's painted. Now this next painting from about 1506 to 9 from the Netherlands shows an interesting kind of crossover hybrid between the late medieval and early Renaissance shapes of lutes. So it has, there's a closer up view there, so it has 5 courses. And it has the second smaller rose in the shape of a lancet window. Now these are features obviously of a late medieval lute, but it also has the Renaissance body shape, and there's quite a lot of examples of this combination in the Netherlands from this sort of era. Now here next is a very famous painting by Hans Holbein, who's famous for painting various royalty. Painting is the Ambassadors. It features a lute here, but also an interesting thing to do with perspective, which they were developing at the time in the Renaissance, is you can see this skull here. The idea, as far as I'm aware, again, someone who knows more about art will, I'm sure, comment something about this in the comments. The idea is that looking from a certain angle you see the skull, but looking directly on you don't. Anyway, for our purposes, here is a close-up of the lute. So this is a 6-course instrument, 6-course lute, and you can see here also is an open book of music. So the shape of these pegs is quite something. I've heard these pegs described as, or called rather in the past, bollock pegs. I think that's fairly self-explanatory there. So here is a beautiful painting from 1426. This is one of the main paintings which I wanted to see that day, because it has a very unusual depiction of a late medieval 5-course lute. two of them in fact, at the bottom here, as you can see, and they are very typical of late medieval lutes. So here is a close-up detail of the first one. You can see you've got the double sound hole there. It's very medieval in style, whereby you have a big sound hole which is nearer to the bridge than you'd find on later lutes, as well as obviously the second sound hole. And I just love the detail you can see here in these carved roses. You've also got a medieval feature here on the neck join, where it kind of curves into the neck as opposed to being angular joint that you'd have on Renaissance lutes. The second of the two lutes. It's quite similar in design, but you've got it from a slightly different angle. It also shows just how rounded the body is, which is a very typical medieval feature. And both of these medieval lutes here are being played with a plectrum, much like the oud is still today. However, this plectrum is made from a feather. Feather plectrums are still used in North Africa on instruments such as the oud arpi and the quitra. On to the next one. This is a famous, again, Dutch painter called Hans Memling. It's another example of one of the early Renaissance lutes shown in paintings from the Netherlands. Again, you've got that Renaissance shape. Here's a close-up of that one. And now to go back in time a bit, here is an Italian one from 1370. This one features a gittern. This medieval instrument here is a gittern. It was traditionally carved out of a single block of wood. And that sickle-shaped peg box is also very typical of a gittern. You can also see here a harp, a psaltery, and a medieval viol. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I will answer them in a future video. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing if you like. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm not your mum.